The Iranian leadership is increasingly under pressure, according to Vienna's Der Standard. The paper notes that the threat now comes from two directions at once, both domestic and external. Inside the country, protesters are taking to the Iranian leadership is increasingly under pressure, according to Vienna's Der Standard. The paper notes that the threat now comes from two directions at once, both domestic and external. Inside the country, protesters are taking to the streets, some prepared to use force, chanting slogans such as "End the dictatorship." At the same time, warnings from the United States and Israel are growing louder and, after the 12-day war in June 2025, no longer seem implausible. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio has been actively spreading the message, including via the State Department's Persian-language account on X, that Donald Trump keeps his promises. The claim being pushed is that the U.S. president is prepared to come to the aid of protesters should the regime resort to violence against them. Sociologist Azadekian takes a different view in an article for the Paris-based Le Monde, arguing that Iranians must shape their own future. She warns that Trump's renewed threats of military intervention, especially following Maduro's kidnapping, along with expressions of support from Israel's Mossad and Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, ultimately serve the interests of the Islamic Republic. Such statements allow the authorities to brand the opposition as agents of the United States and Israel. According to Kian, real change can only come from within. She stresses that only the continuation of social movements and cooperation among diverse social, ethnic, and religious groups can free the Iranian people from the regime's control. Madrid's El País strikes a more pessimistic tone, cautioning against excessive optimism. The newspaper observes that some commentators are cheering, without clear leadership, a coherent organization, and a strategy aimed at the true power center of the system, not the aging clerics, but the generals of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. The protests risk only further weakening President Masoud Pezeshkian. Given how constrained he already is by the system, this would merely strengthen hardliners within the regime. Writing for the Paris Weekly L'Obs, Iranian political scientist Hamid Inayat highlights important differences between the current unrest and earlier protest waves. He notes that this movement is far more structured, with groups managing to sustain momentum across multiple arenas, from markets and universities to smaller provincial towns. Inayat also points out that, from the very beginning of the uprising, politicians in France and other countries openly condemned the regime's repression. He argues that such international pressure clearly limits how far the authorities can go in cracking down. Stockholm's Svenska Dagbladet adds that Europe also stands to gain if the Ayatollah-led system collapses. The newspaper emphasizes that the theocratic regime poses a threat beyond Iran's borders. Freedom of expression in Europe, particularly the freedom to criticize Islam, has been under pressure for decades, dating back to the 1989 fatwa against writer Salman Rushdie. In recent years, Iran has also been linked to criminal attacks targeting Iranian dissidents abroad and Israeli organizations in Sweden. This, the paper argues, illustrates Iran's role in a growing global network of authoritarian regimes working to shield themselves from their own populations. For this reason, Svenska Dagbladet concludes, democracies have a clear interest in supporting popular demands for freedom, including those in Iran.